today's screencast is an overview of basically of the rest of the chapter. We're going to go over the different types of plant structures, which you've probably heard about before, and then in the coming sections we will go into a little bit greater detail. So, main thing you need to know here, the three organs of seed plants are roots, stems, and leaves. They work together to obviously keep the plant alive. Roots do a couple different things. I really like these slides because they highlight, you can't see with the roots too much, but they're highlighted in color and the rest of the plant is in black and white. Roots do a couple different things. They anchor plants in the ground and they absorb water and nutrients. And then obviously they transport it to the rest of the plant so that the plant can stay alive and do its thing. Stems also support the plant. Specifically, they hold up the leaves, as you can see here. And they also transport nutrients and water from back and forth from the roots to the leaves. Like I just said, stems hold up the leaves. They produce those leaves, and they also produce flowers. And then the transport system, again, moves water from the roots up to the leaves and carries the products of photosynthesis, which we're going to call food, but it's glucose. I'll tell you why we're calling it food in a little while. Carries the products of photosynthesis from the leaves back down to the roots. So it's basically the highway system of the plant. And then the leaves are probably the parts of the plant that you're most familiar with. Their big job is photosynthesis. They also expose tissue to the dryness of the air, and they have these adjustable pores that help conserve water. We'll talk about those in later slides. Side of gas exchange. Plants have three main types of tissues, so everything seems to be occurring in threes right now: dermal, vascular, and ground tissue. And you can see that the three cross sections of the principal organs of seed plants show that all three of these contain dermal, vascular, and ground tissue. They're color-coded here, so you can see what's going on. Dermal tissue, just like the epidermis, dermal, dermatologist, that derm means skin or outer covering. So the dermal tissue is the protective outer covering of a plant. Just like in us, the outer covering is called epidermis. Sometimes the epidermal cells produce a thick waxy layer called the cuticle, which protects against drying. In older plants, dermal tissue might be way deep down and covered with bark. Some epidermal cells have trichomes that help protect the leaf and may give the leaf a fuzzy appearance. I have a plant in the classroom that has purple trichomes. They're little hairs. And then in roots, dermal tissue includes root hair cells that help absorb water. Vascular tissue transports water and nutrients throughout the plant. We have xylem, which conducts water, and phloem, that conducts food. Here's how to remember that. Xylem, WXY is what I'm trying to underline there. W is for what water starts out with, and xylem starts out with XY. So if you just think of the alphabet, WXY, water is transported by xylem, and then think of the sound of phloem and food. Both have that F sound. Phloem transports food. These are made of long, slender cells that connect almost like piping in your house. Xylem cells are called tracheids. The cells die as they mature and leave only the cell walls, and that's how they are transport like pipes. They're empty in the middle. The cell walls contain something called lignin, which is a molecule that gives wood much of its strength. There's opening in the walls that connect cell to cell. And you have pits, little thinner regions or holes that allow water to diffuse out of the tracheids. Flowering plants, also known as angiosperms, have another type of xylem tissue called vessel elements. They're wider and they are stacked on one on top of the other like a stack of tin cans. And these are actually just wider versions of those pipes through which water can move freely. The main phloem cells are called sieve tube elements. I don't know why it says xylem up there. It should say phloem. Main phloem cells are sieve tube elements. They're arranged end to end, and they have many small holes through which nutrients move. Same sort of setup here. And again, that should say phloem. The remaining organelles, after they lose their nuclei and they mature, the remaining organelles are kind of smashed up against the cell wall and kept alive by companion cells. So again, these are like pipes. They transport materials. We have the companion cells that help keep the sieve tube organelles alive. The second type of tissue is called ground tissue. Produces and stores sugars and helps support the plant. It is neither dermal nor vascular. This is the third type of tissue. Sorry. And then we have three types of ground tissue, another three. Parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Parenchyma has thin cell walls, collenchyma has thicker cell walls, and sclerenchyma has the thickest cell walls. Parenchyma cells, again, have thin cell walls, large central vacuole, thin layer of cytoplasm. Parenchyma cells in leaves are the site of most of the plant's photosynthesis. They have many chloroplasts. Collenchyma cells have strong flexible cell walls that help support plant organs, roots, stems, and leaves. So that's support. And then sclerenchyma cells have extremely thick, rigid cell walls, and they make ground tissue such as seed coats tough and strong. So this is the very, very rigid plant tissue. How do plants grow? These areas, these regions are called meristems. Unspecialized cells, you remember that term? Like stem cells? Where mitosis produces new cells that are ready for differentiation. So we find meristems at the tips of stems and roots. These are called apical meristems. An apex is a top or an end. The tip of a stem or root is called an apex, and these meristems are called apical meristems. So a plant grows from its top, if we're talking about the stem, and from its bottom if we're talking about a root. So the middle of the stem and the middle of the root will stay put. The plant gets taller from the apex, the top and the bottom. Very important to know. The first cells, like we said, are unspecialized, and then they differentiate into the different types of tissues of the plant, the dermal, vascular, and ground tissue. These specialized cells are found in cones and flowers. Those are also produced in meristems. Pattern of gene expression, those Hox genes, those body plan genes. Same with plants as in animals. Pattern of gene expression changes, and we see differentiation. We'll talk about flowers a whole lot later. Last thing, not necessarily in this section, it's in actually the previous chapter, but difference between monocots and dicots. First of all, on the test, you'll see the word eudicot. Means the same thing. Monocots are always called monocots, but dicots sometimes are called eudicots. So difference between these, we'll just call them monocots and dicots for this purpose. Monocots, the term stems from no pun intended. We have a single cotyledon. A cotyledon is a seed leaf. It's a embryonic leaf that first comes out of the ground and starts the process of photosynthesis. So monocots, mono meaning one, have a single seed leaf. You can see this is a corn kernel here. So we're talking about a corn plant. Leaves have parallel veins. If you look at a blade of grass, it's a monocot, parallel veins. If you look at the flowers, the floral parts are in multiples of 3, so either 3 petals or 6 petals or 9. The stems have vascular bundles scattered throughout, so sort of random. And the roots are called fibrous roots. They're fibrous roots. They kind of hover along the ground surface instead of growing deep down. If you've ever pulled grass out of the ground, you can see it sends out these runners to the side that just can kind of keep going and going. Now, in all of these places, dicots are a contrast. Dicots, prefix di means two embryonic leaves, cotyledons. And this looks like a lima bean maybe. This is a maple leaf. If you've ever looked at those helicopters that are going to start getting produced in about a month or so, those helicopters are carrying seeds. It's a method of seed dispersal. You take the seed out and it will break into 2 halves and have 2 seed leaves in there, 2 cotyledons. In a maple plant, or a dicot, any kind of a dicot, the veins are branched. They're not parallel. If there are flowers, the floral parts are in multiples of 4 or 5. So seemingly a little bit more complex and a little bit more organized. In the stems, the vascular bundles are arranged in a ring. And then dicots or eudicots, make sure you know that those are the same thing, they have tap roots, like a dandelion, one single root that reaches deeply into the ground and just has some small amounts of branching off of it.